Hey folks, welcome back to this two-part series. This is part two with Katheryn and of talking about mixing theology, right, and culture, God and culture. So if you haven't watched part one, go back and watch it. This is basically the second half of that interview. So God's blessings to you. Let's jump right in.
Hello and welcome back to the Faith and Culture Show. I'm Katheryn Camp, your hostess for the show. This is where we dig into those difficult topics that are happening in our culture. And we do this, why? To educate ourselves in order to be having those difficult conversations with our culture that count, conversations with an eternal perspective. Well, today I'm really happy to introduce to you all Stephen Garofalo. I've known him for quite some time now. He's the president of Reason for Truth and the founder of Equipped Academy. You might want to check it out after you hear what he has to say. I believe the one or more of the three women who started BLM went to Columbia. And yes, they were proud that they came out and said, we're trained Marxists. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, I believe that our president-elect, I don't know how you say him, Kamala, whatever you want to call her, Harris.
Oh, she ran for president.
She ran for president. I think she went to Columbia. I could be wrong to fact check that, but I think so. So what I found out is that the main crux. Now I don't know everything because Columbia is has been known to be academically a good school, but you could be the best academic school, but if your worldview is really radically, leftist or non-biblically based or non-Western based, which is based on biblical principles,
right?
Then that's what you get. But from my understanding, and I watched a number of shows, and they were saying that, and again, a good thing to check would be the overwhelming economic. You take it. Let's say you're going to study, world business or world economics. There, the primary worldview of the economic program there is to overwhelm, and the only way to bring down capitalism is to literally overwhelm the system with government money. Therefore, and I'm being simplistic, overwhelm the system, give out so much money, you kind of just collapse it, then you can rebuild it as you like.
Right.
I'm not an expert on Columbia. I heard that, again, people can check that out.
That's okay. Anybody out there, write a comment if you know differently.
Yeah. Love that. I did not go to Columbia, but from my understanding, that is the basic principle of what most of their, I'm sure they have some more conservative professors, but, it used to be years ago, in the 90s, there was like 80% liberal, or they call them Democratic at that time, or liberal professors at the universities. Now it's more than 90+%.
Right.
Yeah. So how can you compete that? Yeah.
How does a student who goes in as a conservative, believes in God, loves their Bible, come out of a place like that intact?
Yeah.
Most of them don't.
No, you're absolutely, which you and I know that 3 out of 4 go to the university ill-prepared, which is one of the reasons what you do, and I do what I do, is to go in there and work with students, get them shored up in their faith. I'm very, and I don't, even for my own kids, I've allowed, my daughter does ballet and my son he's just getting his, he's getting his award for it's called a Freedom Award. It's like an Eagle Scout. It's Trail Life USA. Trail Life USA is Christian based. It's much more difficult than the Eagle Scout. Eagle Scout now is they've really lowered all the bars because it's no longer boys. It's the Scout, so it has boys and girls in it. And I'm not saying they lowered the bar just for the girls. I'm just saying in general.
There was a Girl Scouts. Let me just say that, people. Girls were not left out.
Yeah. So I think so here we'll, the point is that my kids, I tried at a 13, 14 years old, I started to expose them to the world and, and some things. And so my daughter went to dance. She's done ballet, which is a fairly liberal ecosphere.
Oh, yeah.
And, but we just made sure that we kept, my son more, has a strong moral compass. They both do. My son is very more like me. He's a little more black and white and things. So my daughter has done really proud of her in terms of being able to navigate, because she's gone away for summers, into real, and had to deal with the LGBTQ community and all that. And few times they've kind of aggressively come after her verbally and without even knowing who she was. And she handles it very well, very respected. And she doesn't have any angst or hate against them. And
Right.
she's learned how to navigate those waters. So I'm proud of her. So, but then I've had friends who I had one friend, a number of friends, but one friend in particular, his daughter went away. He was military. His son's military. Mom is Asian. Dad is American. And she went away, and she got recruited into becoming a man from a woman, and removed her breasts. And not only that, what they do is a lot of times they coach you. They bring her a surrogate mother, and that's what they did. And they caught her really being very aggressively nasty and critical of her parents on the internet.
Oh.
My advice to him was, I would have one. My kids will not do that. I can tell you, it's old school and very Italian. My mom and dad are both Italian. And it's the culture, the families next. There's God, and just right below that is family, and you don't disrespect the family in that way. And to come out aggressively and just spew hatred and criticism of me, especially, and they were good parents. They're great parents. I would told them, my advice was, I'd welcome her into your house for the holidays, but outside that, I would write her off, and I'd let her know I would never give her. And this is hard to say, but I would cut her right out of any kind of will, because I would not give any of your resources to fuel that type of hatred and that type of anti-family sentiment, because you're just fueling something very evil. He didn't agree with me, but yeah.
Yeah, there we go. I mean, this is an evil thing. And even though this relativistic moral, I don't know if they were knowledgeable relativists in Rome.
Yeah.
Not everybody was participating in orgies. Yes, they had many gods. They had the pantheon, where temple prostitution was just a thing. It wasn't. That's why Christianity turned everything on its head.
Yeah.
The men pedophiles who had their boy toys, boy slaves, that was
Pompeii. Pompeii was just a nasty place.
It wasn't always accepted, but it was mostly the aristocrats who were doing that. And so I didn't live then. I don't know, but it was not a prideful thing for the young man. In fact, some of the I have this in my book, some of the artifacts that have been found and writings where they would release the young men before they became of age, because then they were afraid that they would turn on them and start using them that way. They would be bigger and stronger.
Yeah, so, that happened now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a society that does not have, like you mentioned, you said our country, that our foundation is on Christian morals and ethics.
Yeah.
And when you get to the relativism, it's not relativistic to coerce a child into thinking that they are in the wrong body and that they have to become something that they will never be able to become biologically, scientifically. I don't care how many body parts you get cut off. It's not going to happen, which is tragic. So I mean, how do you address this, Stephen, when you're teaching and how can we pull this
Yeah.
out of your book? Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and let me put a little caveat here. This is not a critique of the LGBTQ. They're people just like every one of us are. Let me tell
Yes.
you, one of my best friends, the whole world, is my cousin, and he's gay. And we just came back. My wife and I were visiting. Sometimes I get more often I go visit him, and we have so much fun together. We have a lot of family commonality. When I'm with him, I'm not with a gay person. I'm just with my cousin, and
Right.
and that's the way he, he's very accomplished, by the way. High level of respect, very kind, very level headed. But that being said, uh, how do you deal with it? I think and let me. It's interesting because now you look at the Republican Party. Part of that big umbrella is the homosexual community because they look at
Yeah.
transgender people and they go, this is they just can't stand them for the most part. It's
They
not like they're one happy family. Um, and so, yeah, but how do you deal it and how do you teach on it? I think you have to first open up by saying, these people are just like you and I in many ways. And many times they're hurting. It's just a statistical fact of the
Yes.
abuse that existed in with these people at some level, not always. And so you got to first approach them as people. And then, at the end of the day, the way I look at it, Katheryn, is in the back of my mind, I put it, Christians tend to get so frustrated. That person didn't accept Jesus and they're going to hell. I'm done. I'm
Mm,
going to lunch. And you can't think that way.
maybe
Listen,
not, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Someone else will come along later.
That's right. Exactly. And treat them with respect. And listen, if you listen to them and you love them and you treat them with respect, that's the start point. Because you'll earn a seat at their table to speak to them. And they're happy. Listen, more often than not, 9 out of 10 times they want to hear what you have to say. And one thing I found is, my gosh, I'm not going to hear to harp on because there's many different categories in LGBTQ. But what I found is that the gay and lesbian community are actually fairly easy to talk to because they're open to everything. I come down to the Bible Belt and everybody's saved, even those going to hell. I mean, and I'm not critiquing the South on that. Man, it was so different coming from the North. My friend Lisa used to say to me, in the McLean, I used to go to Church McLean, and we worked for one of the representatives, Congress, because everything was government driven there. And she says, Steve, there's one thing I like about the North. I said, Lisa, what is that one thing? And she goes, you say you're Christian, it means you're a Christian. And
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So where do you
Wow.
start teaching? I think I used to do classes on this, and you teach the young people how to think critically, and then you show them. And
That's
I
the
think
key.
in some ways you have to point out things and take the questions. This is right. This is wrong. I think the way you teach it today is very different than you teach it 20 years ago, because I've been teaching on the subject of morality for 2.5 decades, and I can tell
Mhm.
you it's changed. You can't, nothing makes me more cringy than I was teaching a class and there's this guy, and then God bless him, he's just older, and he goes, yeah, when God didn't create Adam and Steve, it was Adam and Eve. I'm like, oh my gosh, it went out in like the 70s or 80s. I'm like, man, you can't talk to people like that.
No.
It's just disrespectful. I mean, no matter how you feel and whether he's even truthful, it's just, you don't go out and talk to people that way. So
No. And I'm glad you brought that up because it's important to remember we're dealing with humans. I'm not attacking the individual. I'm attacking the institution that pushes this on to people who are already hurting. Something has happened along the way for most of them. That's what the statistics are showing.
yes.
And they need someone to come alongside and not to agree with what they've been told, but to hear them out and let them talk and figure out a way, how can we go down a different path? Like you said, critical thinking is incredibly important. And a lot of problem is everything gets thrust on people, these people who have already have high anxiety, most of them depression. Something has happened to them along the way. And so they need to start looking at life a little bit differently. You know, unfortunately, there's a lot of sexual perversions going on, which it stems directly from moral relativism. Some people find that it's their right to just take an individual, whether a child or a young woman, and do whatever they want. Even, you know, when you get older, there's the corporate snakes too. The women can prey on the young men who want to climb the ladder. So it goes all through. But that's what happens with moral relativism.
Absolutely right. I'm glad you said that. A guy's been getting ragged on for so many years. My gosh, it's what's amazing to me is, I'm roughly speaking, I mean, when I see cheating in a marriage, 9 out of 10 times today, it's the woman who leaves the man. I very seldomly hear of the man leaving the woman anymore. I do, but it's just much more rare. It used to be backwards. It was always the man leaving the woman for the secretary. Remember the old days or whatever, and he blew himself up anyways. But yeah, those you know, that has changed. That's all changed now. And so going back to how do you train the youth? You know, my book covers, and the All Roads Don't Lead to Heaven as well. I go in and teach first principles of logic, and that gives them the foundation. Because Dr. Geiser was asked on the 1 Minute Apologist with Bobby Conway, he said, what's the most important class that, you know, in all of seminary? And I'm thinking to myself, you know, it's got to be theology or, you know, introduction to apologetics, and he goes, logic. And he just like, Bobby Conway's like, really? And Dr. Geiser said, yeah, if you get it wrong there, you get it wrong there forward. And if you think about it, logic has everything to do with morality, right? Because if you're trying to figure out what's right or wrong, you got the moral law written on your heart, you got natural law. But if you say, well, hold on a second, let me look at this specific subject, you can use logical deduction, you know. And then if you're going to say, well, if the Bible is going to instruct me what makes the Bible true or not true, right or wrong, and logic plays into those things. So I teach that to all my classes pretty much. And, you know, the students respond very well to it. But that's where you got to start. You got to, if you get there, then, you know, from there forward, boom, you know, then you can, because everything else you teach stands on those things. So, you know, that's what,
it's true if you think about it. But you know what, Stephen, a lot of people, and I know you see this, they don't have logic in school anymore. They do not have the foundation of that Socratic logic that is like a pattern that until you get the hang of it, you've got to learn that pattern, and then it becomes natural.
If the family's able to afford, or sometimes they're not that expensive, if you can get your child into a classical school, man, do it. Because I have a friend of mine in upstate New York, of all places, upstate, but their school, man, they produce tigers, man. I mean, tigers. You know, they teach them. They go and watch debates. They go watch the Democratic debates. They went and watched, because they're in upstate New York. They went and watched the Clinton debate, and respectably. There was they didn't go there and hackle anybody, but they brought their middle and high school students there, because they were already big time equipped, you know, in classroom, and they come back and critique it. My kids can now critique an argument. They can go to we go to Calvary Church in Charlotte, you know, which is very biblical. And now there's been a handful of times we've been out of town or here, that we'll go to another church, and my kids can smell bad logic, bad theology a mile away. And they've been doing that since they were young teenagers. And I'm like, really? Dad, and they'll come out, Dad, look at these 5 things. These are 8 things. And I've taught them to be generous. You know, Dr. Geiser taught that. He said, you know, it doesn't matter what you hear. He says, every single sermon has some truth in it. even if it's a little bit of truth.
Yeah.
And so, there's a difference between a pastor who is doesn't know any better and one who's aggressively teaching the wrong truth. Now, my opinion is I have very little mercy on either of those categories because, and that's why I don't, when you talk about Joel Osteen or there's some other churches, big names that are not really super biblical. I'm good with what they do. Just don't call yourself a church, right? I mean, be a church. What is a church? Church is all around the Word of God, and you've got to teach the Word of God. If you're not doing that, you're not church, not in reality. So
and the character, nature. It's not all hunky dory. Jesus is the one who talked more about hell and sin than anyone else in Scripture, and he's mentioned several times in Scripture. Many will come to me in that day, and I'll say, "Get away from me," because they'll say, "Oh, I did this, I did that in your name," and I. Food banks. I can think of the modern term. We did the food bank. We worked at a homeless shelter for a little bit. We did this. We did that. It's like, get away. I didn't know you.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to me. I was asked at my church, can a Catholic be saved?
People think that.
I grew up Catholic, and I said,
me too.
Did you? So, and I said, well, it depends on what you mean. I said, not all Catholics are you have some Catholics that do. I mean, I know a lady here, she was a part of a company that helped fix a pipe on her pool in her backyard. And she's like on fire for the Lord. She's, Bible study every Wednesday night. And it's amazing. Her husband teaches. But the question is, does the Catholic doctrine, if you really buy into the Catholic doctrine that the sacraments save you and that you got to pray to all the saints, I'd say, yeah, you're really off track. But, I never bought into any of that. I went all the way from baptism in the Catholic Church to confirmation. And some people just they will get on me for that. And I said, listen, I always had a heart for God. So, I think you got to be careful. I never prayed to Mary. I always looked at, that goes back to the logic. I mean, as a kid, we went through you go through, I don't know about you, if you went through the whole thing, but I mean, I went, through, I was baptized. I went through communion. Remember that? I went through penance, communion. Yeah, I went through confirmation. But when we, penance was a whole class. It was like you had to, like that was like 6 months. I don't remember, a year. You had to go through all these. And I remember, they're like, okay, everyone line up, and we're going to go through, going to see the Father and
go in the booth. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't even have I was like, I don't remember where it was, but I had a confessional booth. And so I looked at my buddy who brought me to my first Bible study, and he loves the Lord, and his sister, not so much, but I looked at her at that time and I said, hey, and I asked her just a simple question, like a little babe, we must've been 14, I'm guessing, because confirmation is 15 or 16. And I looked at her and I said, I got a question. If God is God, like he's everywhere, if he's everywhere in all places, why do we got to go see this guy to ask forgiveness? I don't logically, I don't get that. And she looks at me, she turns around, she goes, Steve, it's just a bunch of garbage. It's not true. Because here's the deal. It goes back to natural law and the moral law. Everybody in that room, unless you're really led by the nose, you got to ask that question. I had not read my Bible to that point because I didn't really, no one gave me a Bible. I didn't have a Bible until they gave it to me when I was 16, different story. But any human being can deduce that that's the truth. And for people in America, we have the benefit of Santa Claus, right? I mean, what are you talking from? I thought about that. Santa Claus is not all bad in the sense that, that's not what Christmas is about. But it trains kids that there's a being out there, and it gets in their head this concept of some kind of omniscient being that looks at if you're well behaved or not, which is morality. So once you understand that Santa Claus is not, hope kids are not watching this, you got to get in trouble with some Catholic parents. But but I thought that was very interesting. It's if you can you tell your kids, like we taught our kids. I told my son when he was 4, I said, explain to them. I sat down with my twins, and my youngest wasn't able to hear. I said, listen, this is the truth. There was a Santa Claus. He's a real figure, but this is what Christmas is about. The birth of Christ, blah, blah, blah. My son comes down, 4 years old. Dad, Santa Claus was here. And I'm like, 5, 6 years. But they learned. But the point is, you can see how the logic fits in, then the morality, and how all that stuff clicks together at one thing. They're not separate things.
And so that's bringing it full circle, that coming back to logic, you won't have, if you look at this, you won't have relativism, because you can see it won't work. It just won't, it doesn't work. A red light is a red light. It means stop in every country, in every place where you go around the world. And you can't make it green. It's not like, well, for you it's red, but for me it's green, right?
I hate to quote Ravi Zachariah, because I personally think his young stuff was, his early stuff was very good. People say, well, I threw all his stuff out. I said, well, his stuff later on, anything that was created after his fall, yeah, you have to assume it's tainted. But
which is so sad.
It is. But up until that point, he had great contributions. But he said years and years and years ago, he says, listen, to be a relativist, and he was from India, he says, it doesn't matter if you're in New Delhi or New York. If you close your eyes and step off into the street during rush hour, you're going to get run over by a bus. Doesn't matter if you're a relativist or an absolutist. Exactly what you said.
Yeah. Wow. So where can people find your book, and can they sign up to get into your academy, or is it just for young people?
Yeah, no. If they want to go to the academy, they can go to equippedacademy.com. We're working on 4 more courses to be added to it. We break them up into different areas, like culture. One is theology. And then I have the other one is marketplace. But we have a number of courses that are in play we probably 4 more coming out. They could just go there if they happen to be a student, or there's a class that we do have a scholarship that we have a number of our supporters that donate money, and they go, we want to see students going through this. So if we have a classroom, we can actually give them those courses for free. The course for the basics, the equipped basics. No, they just get the book from us, and then we'll give them the course, which is twice as much as the book. So I think it's $40, something like that. Okay. And anyway, so yeah, equippedacademy.com. Another way people can find me is I do have a community at StephenGarofalo.com. There's a paywall you can get around it. Don't need to do that. And that's on locals.com. So you have to download the app. But I put out typically an article mostly on Monday and Friday. And then we produce a podcast. You can just go to reasonfortruth.org. That's the best thing.
Okay, so they can find all that there.
It's on there. Yeah. Academy, one-stop shop. There you go.
Excellent. Well, I'm real excited. I hope people out there, I hope maybe you want to go check it out, and maybe you have a young person in your life that you think, wow, or you're homeschool, right? And yes. And you could add this as one of the classes that you teach for your homeschoolers. So anyway, thank you so much, Stephen, for being here and for doing what you do. It's a labor of love, really.
Yes, it is. It is. It's investing in God's calling. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here, and you're welcome. God bless you.
Thank you, Katheryn.